Hello, everybody. Little
Hello,
sticky with
hello.
the technical side of it today, but looks like we got it going. Welcome to this is third in the series of our abuse series, and this one's called "How the War Within." Okay, Kelly, what is it?
Self-abuse. Self-abuse. Yeah,
Yes.
this week we're going to dive into self-abuse. What is it? Why is it showing up, and how do we shift it?
Thank you. And Kelly Love, you can find her at Kelly Love Rewilding on Facebook, and you'll find us at Anonymous Sanctuary, also on Facebook, and then anonymoussanctuary.com and kellyloverewilding.com. And we're very excited to be here. This is such an important topic and something that's very, very dear to our hearts.
Yeah.
And Kelly's located, for information, out of Colorado right now. She's been here in Costa Rica quite a bit as well, where we're located. And we've done a lot of work together. And personally, I have very high regard for Kelly and her passion and the work that she does. And she'll be kind of directing the flow and with me contributing as well. Freya wasn't able to be here today. She had to take care of some self-care.
And we totally honor self-care. This is what we do, right? We teach people how to care for themselves.
Self-care comes first because that's the root of everything else.
Yes. That's how we show up in power.
So jumping into this.
Yeah, so jumping in. So the previous couple of weeks, we've discussed how abuse can show up. We gave a rough overview of how it could be self-abuse, social abuse, and even just like abuse from people in our lives. And then last week, we talked about how the war within shows up in how we show up in this world. So if there's chaos in our life, it's generally a good indication that there's chaos internally. And, you know, looking at the state of affairs right now with this world, we can definitely see that and feel that how this disconnection from self and outsourcing everything to everybody has disempowered us and kept us in this place of internal chaos and not really dealing with what's inside. And what happens after a long period of time of going through painful situations, abusive situations, trauma, we take that on, especially if it's not fully healed and expressed. And one of the ways that that ends up showing up is in self-abuse. And so today we want to talk about what exactly is self-abuse, how it shows up, and how we can engage it and shift it. So I want to remind everybody that how we learn as humans is by mirroring what's been shown to us. And so why is this important to remember this right now? Because for most people who have gone through, most people that are showing up abusing themselves have gone through horrific abuse, anywhere from neglect to beating to raping to losing loved ones, any number of these things.
Emotional, physical.
Yes, emotional, physical, mental abuse, all of it. All of these things have an impact on us, and they leave an energetic signature inside of us. And so when the world is reflecting to us over and over that we are not valuable enough to be treated properly, that we are not valuable enough to be loved, that we are not valuable enough to be cared for, we take on that belief system. A lot of times we take on that belief system. And so that shows up in various ways. One of the ways is through addiction. And it's more than just addiction to a substance. It can be an addiction to anything: sex, drugs, alcohol, perfectionism. So we want to go ahead, Michael. We want to lean into that a little bit. You want to lean into that?
Yeah, work addiction, and anything that takes us away from ourselves and our connections with others. It's in a way to numb us out or to distract us from dealing with the things that are keeping us from those things. But these end up being that we get a release from the pain that we're feeling, and on top of that, when we get a boost, because some of these activities create an endorphin boost, so we get a release from the pain, we get a boost, and instead of seeking our joy from within and from our connections with others, we end up finding a substitute. These are always destructive in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating too how our bodies are wired to self-soothe when we're in a traumatic situation. It's like our body's way of adapting to say, okay, I can make it through this. Let's, the brain releases some chemicals to help us make it through it. And that is part of what feeds the addiction to these addictive behaviors. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love bringing this awareness to people because oftentimes there's so much shame around, oh, I can't kick this drug habit, or I keep sleeping with men that aren't valuing me, or women that take advantage of me, or I can't get over this perfectionism. And when we realize that it's a subconscious pattern running on top of a chemical cocktail that gets released that makes that behavior addictive, all of a sudden it's an opportunity to engage it with some compassion and understanding and some knowledge to resolve it in a way that actually works. Another way that we see self-abuse showing up a lot is this inner critic. And it sounds like a narcissist. And Michael, you do such a great job of explaining this. And then I want to probably bring in another angle, but I'd love for you to share.
Well, yeah, we live with somebody, whether as a child or with an intimate partner, who feeds us a line and feeds us a tone of voice and feeds us with a belief system over and over and over again, till gradually we start to believe this. We start to accept it about ourselves, and it's not just intellectual. You can't just turn it off by saying, oh, that ain't true. We believe it on a cellular level. We believe it on all levels, emotional level. And then even when we get that person out of our life, the voice continues. And we got that internal critic. It's like we never really got rid of them to a degree. We still hear the things that they say. We still, when we look at ourselves, we try maybe some positive affirmations in the mirror or something like that. And we hear their voice or something very similar to their voice, particularly in the way they speak, telling us bullshit or telling us, no, what about this? What about that? All the things that the narcissist has trained our ego to do. And it's a self-reinforcing thing. It's done with intention. As we start to accept these things about ourselves, we become easier to control, and easier to fool. And when we start to believe these things, their power over us becomes greater. And unfortunately, when we finally do get them out of our lives, we end up with this artifact from the abusive situation.
Yeah, it's like if we could think about it, like if we've ever heard an annoying song, and I won't share one right here because I don't want anyone to be stuck with it. But when we hear it on repeat, it gets stuck in our head. It doesn't matter how annoying it is, it stays in the head. Or if something isn't replaced, right?
Yeah, one of the an earworm, which is a great name for it.
And one of the techniques that Michael or Mika, Freya, and I use in our trauma healing sessions is NeuroLinguistic Processing, because we want to reprogram the brain, because most of what we're running off in life is subconscious programming. Our brain doesn't want to have to actively engage every single piece of information coming our way, because it's millions of pieces of information. And so our brain learns to categorize things and have set responses to certain things. And that includes how we've been talked to, how we respond to how we've been talked to, and ultimately how we engage ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, it's a cellular level. It isn't superficial. It isn't something you can say, oh yeah, that's true, I'm going to do different from now on. It doesn't work that way.
Right. And mind over matter generally doesn't work there, because something like this has affected us on all levels. Only addressing the mind with positive mantras isn't quite effective enough to replace deep-seated programming like this. And one of the things that we talk about with our clients are these Grand Canyons that get formed in us, these Grand Canyon patterns that get formed in us. And that is from a repeated use of a certain behavior pattern. And so in order to shift that pattern, you have to interrupt the process. Right, Michael? And this is what we do with our clients.
Yeah, it'll feel like you're trying to create a new Grand Canyon in effect. And it's kind of true. You're creating new patterns. You're creating new ways of reacting, new ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of depth to it. You're going to want to fall back into the old Grand Canyon, so to speak. And so it's not an easy process, but it's essential to getting past this.
Mm-hmm. One of the other ways that we see a lot of self-abuse showing up are self-harming practices. Self-harming practices can be any number of things. A lot of people cut themselves. And from the personal experience that I've had with people that get into cutting themselves, it's oftentimes it's rooted in such deep dissociation from stimuli that the people experience numbness and dissociation inside. And so as a way to feel alive, to feel anything, they inflict pain on themselves. And on some level, it's a way of control. It's controlling the environment and saying, I'm controlling my pain now. What's been your experience with that?
Absolutely. Is an attempt to feel. That's exactly right. And it's not just cutting. There's a lot of self-abuse that goes on. That it's like almost the only way you can break through the deadness that you're in, the space that you're living. And there's also the voice isn't just passively speaking to you. It actually has an agenda. It can have the same agenda, or it can have another one. As you dip into self-loathing, and the voice sort of embodies that in the way it gives you feedback about yourself, you can end up self-sabotaging your own life. And you find yourself sort of two people in a way, and I don't mean literally, but where you're like, why did I do that? I don't want this. I don't want this for my life. But then later on, you find yourself in a place where you're almost gleefully creating that. And you just have to realize there is a battle going on, and it's a sad one. It's an internal abuser. Like we were talking about this self-abuse, it's an internal abuser. And many people know exactly what that internal abuser intends. Just from interacting with it, they know it, and they think, well, I'll just win this battle. And then the next one comes up, well, I'll just win this one. Instead of going for the root of it, because they don't know how. They're just constantly fighting this battle with a part of themselves that literally wants to destroy their lives, or whatever its motive is. They know it. They know what the motive is.
And I would even offer to people that the self-sabotage is rooted in receiving this message many times over and over, that whatever you're doing is not good enough. And why do I say that? Because when people go through a lot of abuse and they develop coping patterns, like maybe tend and befriend, or perfectionism, like if I do everything perfect, then I won't get abused, or if I take care of my abuser, or everything around around this abusive person's environment then maybe they won't abuse me. And when that is met with abuse, attempt after attempt, this message gets embedded, this belief gets embedded in us that why even try? Why? And I remember a point in my life where I just said, fuck it, I'm done trying. And I went off the deep end, and I was high and drunk pretty much every day. I lost track of how many men I slept with. Yeah, anything, extremely violent, showing up in a violent way. And it's because I'd received messages like this and other messages like, you know, when I didn't want to go to college right away, instead of my father encouraging me and asking me, hey, what do you want to be? Because I didn't receive any guidance about college. Okay. I didn't receive any guidance about how to show up in this world. Instead, I got reflected back to me, oh, you're going to work at McDonald's for the rest of your life. And I in my head, I was like, yeah, fuck you, Dad. And on a subconscious level, I think I took that to heart because I have seen myself historically have a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors. Even to this day, I really have to talk myself up when I'm about to do something big or show up in this world big. I really have to talk myself up. And sometimes I even have to move whatever dense emotion is still in there. If I'm believing an old story, I'll go out and seek a practitioner to work with. So these are very real beliefs and patterns that stick with us for a long time, and they take a huge amount of energy and effort to shift.
Yeah. Another way it shows up, it's a really interesting way, is sometimes that voice is the one driving us in our success. And
yeah,
we'll find ourselves, again, we know the voice, we recognize the patterns, but we find ourselves being successful when we follow this voice, even though we don't always like the way it speaks to us. We may be working harder as a result to try to prove the voice wrong, and we may be very exacting.
That perfectionism, right?
Perfectionism, all this stuff, which can yield positive results in the short term.
Sure.
Right? We can be enormously successful with this voice tagging along, egging us on. But ultimately, if our success is tied to our abuser, it's going, in the end, it's going to crash. It's going to crash and burn, because we're not doing it from, first of all, we're not doing it from our heart. We're doing it because this voice is telling us to do it. So it isn't our authentic path. It's one that somebody else is putting us on. And secondly, again, what is the motive? What is the real belief that voice has? What did our abuser really believe about us? And ultimately, our desire to prove them wrong backfires, because we really do believe that about ourselves at root.
Yeah, and I think that was part of what drove the other extreme end of how I showed up in this world of extreme doubt and then extreme perfectionism, where I just wanted to be the best at everything up until a certain point when I just said, okay, nothing's working.
And then you give up.
Yeah, giving up. Another way that we see self-abuse showing up is in eating disorders. This can look like anorexia, bulimia, emotional eating, like starving yourself as well. And this is something I leaned into recently. I went through, disengaging from a person who I really loved, a relationship that I really loved and was hoping would work out. And when it didn't work out, real depression kicked in and heavy feelings. And one of the things that I noticed was my tendency to just eat, and I couldn't gain weight. I was just eating. And so I sat with that, why am I stuffing myself? What am I stuffing down? What am I not wanting to feel? And I'm bringing this example up because we can look at our eating patterns in a psychosomatic way. Like what is our eating habit saying about us psychosomatically? What I discovered about my eating pattern of stuffing myself was I was just trying to, I mean, the emotions were so much. I was just like trying to stuff them down. Like there were too many at once. They all wanted to come out. And it was overwhelming at times. And so as a way to distract, I would eat. And for a lot of people, this turns into a long-term unhealthy pattern where then they develop things like obesity and other health disorders. And so when I see clients that have a lot of excess soft and fatty tissue on their body, my psychosomatic brain goes, I wonder what's buried under there. I wonder what's hiding there. I wonder what's trying to be protected right now.
Yeah.
And same with like anorexia. If we're starved of love and affection and nourishment, it makes sense that for some it would show up in an eating disorder, starving ourselves from the very nourishment that we need to survive.
Excellent. Yep.
Do you have anything you want to share with that?
No, I think you handled that very well. I would like to bring up shame.
Yeah.
Shame starts out as an externalized projection. In fact, you even hear the phrase "shame on you" as a child, and you're like, "What?" And basically, as a child, what you're being told is you have to accept this guilt that I'm giving to you, not because you feel like you did something wrong, but because I'm telling you. Right? It's an externalized thing. It's like you're being coded with it, and it tells you that there's something wrong with you. That's how a child picks it up. There's something wrong with you. And that's sort of the root of shame, is that you are not enough, you are defective, you're broken. And we see this, it's really interesting because we teach that there is no real usefulness to shame at all. And the reaction we get, the pushback we get on that is incredible. Like, well, shameless people are some of the most horrible people. And you're like, what do you mean? And if you ask enough questions, you realize ultimately it's that, well, we can't control them.
Yeah. Right.
They're going to do what they want. Well, what's wrong with doing what they want? Well, they're going to do terrible things to people. Why would they do terrible things to people? Shame is not the basis of being a caring, loving human being. Love is the basis of being a caring, loving human being.
Oh, I got goosebumps from that. Yes.
Right? And integrity combined with guilt is all you need to be kept on that path, being a loving human being, being high integrity, maintaining your integrity. When you feel the twinge of guilt, you've done something wrong, you go to make it right, and you move on. You don't hold on to that. Shame is residual. It stays in there. You can bask in it. You can be taking a bath in it. And many people do. And many people, because shame is so unpleasant and so unnatural, reacts very strongly. And so it isn't a good way to change people's patterns. And people will even react that way when you just point out something that is.
Yeah.
Okay, this situation exists, and like, whoa, it's not my fault. Or even denying it exists, and sidestepping and diverting and deflecting. And you're like, look, dude, it's not your fault. It's just what is. So
it's just what is. Yeah.
Yeah. But our automatic response is to take the blame for it, to step into or to resist taking the blame for it. It's like it's the only choices we believe we have. There's so much shame in our society.
Yeah, I feel like that shame piece right now that we're talking about is also rooted in right and wrong making.
Yeah.
And the longer I do this work, and the longer I understand myself, and the more I dive into understanding the connection between the body mind and how humans function, the more I'm convinced that our behaviors that show up, I like to use the word out of alignment, instead of wrong. So the behaviors that show up out of alignment are rooted in something painful that happened, and we responded to it in a way to protect ourselves and survive. And then that pattern was carried into the present day.
Yeah.
So even understanding that, it really removes the power of shame if we allow it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were, a lot of reason we picked this up is, again, I like to go back to how we learn things as a child, because that's where so much socialization occurs. But we're blamed for something we didn't do, right? And we try to defend ourselves, and we don't have any path, we don't have any power. We're just expected to take the blame for this, even though we know we didn't do it. And that creates an aversion to being blamed for things, right?
Yeah.
Even when we're not being blamed for something, we're still, that's kind of where we step first. And where this has to do with self-abuse is once we have accepted the culture of shame, we start doing it to ourselves. And something, when we're out of alignment, as you said, or out of integrity, instead of saying, oh man, that's messed up, why did I do that? What can I learn about this? What can I learn that so that I can carry forward, not repeat this mistake or this out of alignment, and then take the steps to make it right and to do something about it without the shame. The shame holds you back. It makes everything more difficult. And
it's like a boot in the face.
yeah. Instead of just learning from it, moving forward and letting it go, even once we maybe have made it right and maybe have taken a lesson, we're still wallowing in this, sometimes so wallowing in this shame. I'm such a bad person. Again, there's something wrong with me. We're back into shame is based on there's something wrong with you. You're broken. Instead of you're human, you made a mistake, look into the causes and learn from it and go forward.
Yeah, and even, and I don't mean to nitpick, but I want to touch on that word you used of mistake.
Yeah.
Again, I find most people who are making quote unquote mistakes are doing it on a very subconscious level. And I'll give a personal example. It happened a while ago. My sister and I had an interaction. I was like extremely triggered. She was extremely triggered. And it turned into this yelling match. Now, old Kelly would have just brought my fucking force and like pinned her to the ground and like, I don't know, whatever, something. And what I got instead was, yes, I was like still full of rage and anger. And my sister actually started physically attacking me. And I walked away from that situation thinking, at first there were a couple of things. I wanted to be victim, okay, and not own what I did. And then what I realized is we were both reacting from a triggered place. And I also realized that I didn't show up the same way that I did. I actually was a lot less violent than I had been in the past. And so also recognizing in ourselves like the progress that we make. And I want to back up just a little bit more because I want to talk about one more subtle way of self-abuse that shows up. And this is caretaking for everyone else around you and at the expense of not caring for yourself. Yeah. And this shows up in a lot of people's lives who have gone through abuse. And I noticed that this showed up in my life as well. And it's rooted in living in chaos and having to find a way to ignore the chaos and survive. And this pattern gets carried on into adulthood. And so, when you're stuck in a situation where you're being abused and you can't survive, you find a way to cope in that situation. And you learn to say, I don't need this. I don't need this. I can survive without this. I can survive without this. And then the tend and befriend behaviors can often kick in where, you're starting to take care of those who are abusing you or the environment you're in so that you don't get abused. And then this pattern gets carried into adulthood. And so people have been so disconnected from what feels safe and good that they just put up with so much. Have you experienced this, Michael?
Well, yeah, and not only, I mean, your description of it's perfect, but not only is that true, it's held up as a virtue.
Ah, yes, especially for the feminine. I just want to say that it's held up as a virtue for the feminine. Give your life for your kids, give your life for your husband, give your life for your country. Sacrifice yourself. And then, okay, so I sacrifice myself, then who's going to take care of everybody?
Yeah. I mean, in the simplest illustration for me is always the air. You know, when you're on an airplane, they tell you if the face masks drop with the oxygen, put it on yourself first, then put it on your kid. But our society teaches you try to put it on your kid first, and then maybe both of you will die. But at least you were choosing the child first, right? And so, yeah, it's a very flawed paradigm that we operate under.
It really is. And it just goes against nature. Like, if I'm not caring for myself, I cannot provide care for anyone else.
Yeah.
So and this also shows up as busyness. So oftentimes people want to caretake everyone else and everything else around them because they don't want to feel and listen to what's inside. So anytime I see someone that just has an extremely busy schedule, I often wonder why. What's under that? It doesn't always mean that there's abuse, and oftentimes it does.
Yeah. And then also when we make the decision for everybody what their needs are, you know, and so as a parent, we're so busy taking care of their needs that we're neglecting their emotional needs. Right? You know, they're fed. Yeah, they got a roof over their heads and all that. But they don't get any kind of love. They don't get any kind of touch, attention, affection. You know, well, I'm too busy for that. Well, that's just as important.
Absolutely.
That they feel loved. They feel
absolutely.
Accepted. And so, and we'll also find that in relationships sometimes too, where somebody else decides what the ideal is, what it means to care for somebody, and they won't listen to what you're telling them that you need. You know, I guess we're getting a little bit away from self-abuse, but the thing about it is when we permit this sort of thing, and when we permit ourselves to come last, that's self-abuse.
It is. I had something I wanted to share there. It's going to come back to me.
Okay. Well, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because calling it a mistake is actually problematic. I've heard the phrase, there are no mistakes, only lessons.
And we can understand that from looking at children, right? Like when children and newborns, especially when they're crawling around on their hands and feet and they're putting everything in their mouth and fingers and sockets, like there's no ill intention there. There is pure curiosity. Yeah. And how can we bring that into our adulthood with where we are right now? How can we explore these areas of possible self-abuse with some curiosity instead of right and wrong making? Why am I doing this? What can I learn from it? Yeah. And the other example I wanted to bring up about the self-abuse and the caretaking, oh shoot, it's gonna come back again. It was there, and then
it'll come at its perfect time.
It's gonna come at its perfect time. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what it was. I remember growing up having things said to me from my father, like, I gave you a roof over your head, food on your clothes, or a roof over your head, food in your belly, and clothes on your back. That's all you get. Everything else no, you don't. And I mean, that it is so vivid in my brain to this day. And I remember I can look back at my life historically and see how even being able to show affection to myself was near impossible, let alone show affection to somebody else. Like, I didn't really get affection growing up. Those were the types of reflections I received. And so when we aren't given that care, this is how we show up in the world. If I'm not being cared for, if that's what's being mirrored to me, then how can I care for myself, and how can I really effectively care for anybody else?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, how can we expect somebody else to love us when we don't love ourselves? You know?
Yeah. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. I had a client talking to me the other day about guys that she was attracting into her life and emotionally unavailable and not really loving and honoring her. And I said, well, are you loving and honoring yourself by choosing these men? And that's not something that people want to hear. And it opened the door to understand, where did that come from? And she was able to see like where that behavior came from and work on healing that, so that she could attract the love that she deserves, that she's worth.
The self-sabotaging techniques that we have, that we adopt, they're deep. There are lots of different ways they show up. You know, like, you've got a partner that expresses sincere admiration for you, and you shut them down, or you tell them, point out your flaws when they're admiring your beauty or something like that.
Or deflect, right? Oh yeah, but you're this.
Exactly. All the ways that we don't accept it, and that is cumulative. That is a rejection of your partner.
Yeah.
Right. When you accept what they offer, that's acceptance of your partner. When you reject what they offer, even though you feel like, well, I'm just being humble. No, you're rejecting. You're rejecting a gift.
Yeah.
If you reject a gift all the time, over and over and over again, it's cumulative. It builds up. It's self-destructive to the relationship.
And a gift has two parts, right? The giving and the receiving.
Absolutely.
So to complete that generosity of the gift, there has to be that receiving of it.
Receiving. And if you're the only one giving and never receiving, that's an act of selfishness. Because you're the one saying that giving is a positive thing, but you're not allowing anybody else to be positive towards you. It's like you're hoarding the perceived virtue of it. And it isn't about virtue. It's about an exchange. It's about giving and receiving love and appreciation and everything else.
And I'm glad you brought up the shame piece a little bit earlier, because we are going into that. A lot of this perpetuation of self-abuse is rooted in shame. The shame of allowing the abuse. For myself, even being able to admit that I had been raped and molested, it took me until the Me Too movement came out. And those things happened to me as a toddler and as a young girl in grade school. And there was always this voice in my head, because the people in positions of authority didn't do a fucking thing about it, any of it. And so the message that I got was that it was my fault. I allowed it. And also, is it really molestation if the guy just licked my ears and groped me? Is that really molestation? Or if I can't remember it, did it really happen? I mean, I read a report. Did it really happen? So there's this shame of it being allowed to happen and being these damaged goods. And I understand for myself, I hid a lot of my abuse because of that. I was so afraid to bring it out into the light, because I didn't want to be seen as the girl with daddy issues.
Right. And that's, again, we're back to shame. Why should there be any guilt? Why why should there be any shame attached to being victimized by somebody? But there is.
Exactly. There is.
There is. And
Because it's
yeah, that's one of the that's one of the misuses of this. This is why this is so useless in society. You know,
yeah.
it has nothing to do with guilt and integrity and value systems that you're adhering to. It has to do with something externally applied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's also just the shame of people being aware of it.
Mm-hmm. And the way they're looking at you and what they might be thinking. And yeah, exactly. It's a difficult thing.
And I've often realized that, or I've often seen that when I would hold the view that it was shameful, that it was something dirty or whatever, those were the type of people that I would attract into my life. And those people would say, oh, you need to fix your shit. You need to handle that. You have dad issues. Instead of being met with, wow, oh my gosh, that's so heart-wrenching that you went through that. I hear you. I see you. I believe that you're still loved.
Yeah.
How can we bring you back into alignment?
Or the whole spiritual bypass thing about you create your own reality. You know, that
yeah, let's land on that.
Yeah, that's something that has on one level there's an element of truth to it, but to tell somebody that who's a victim and who's still working through it, or to tell somebody that who was victimized as a child, you know,
you asked for it, you
that's
created
vicious.
it. Oh.
That is a different way of saying it's your fault. You might as well be saying you shouldn't have worn that outfit.
Yeah, or you shouldn't have been born a woman.
Yeah. And so you have to be so careful with concepts like that, because for a person who has completely released everything, all of the trauma around an event, an experience, and has cleared their energy of it, and for them to then look at the ways that the way they were taught, and they look at their past, and they can look the way they were raised, and maybe see that there were ways that they did invite this energy into their space. But you don't do that to somebody who's still suffering. That is just mean-spirited, and it isn't even applicable at that point.
Right. And it's like, okay, so the element of truth, let's touch on that. Let's touch on the element of truth and see how it gets distorted into shame making. So the element of truth is, yes, what we have inside does attract what comes to us on a very subconscious level. And that is because most of the time, like when we're trying to process a trauma, our brain is subconsciously looking for similar situations to try to re-resolve it with a favorable ending. And so a lot of times this perpetuation of abuse is because of a very subconscious pattern. And when we understand that our body is seeking resolution, whoa, my body is seeking a resolution. Okay, fine. How am I able to partner with my body to find this resolution?
Yes. There's no shame there. There's no shame.
There's no shame. And then there's like the generational epigenetic thing where trauma is passed down from generation to generation. And that takes a lot to shift too. I mean, so yes, it could be coming into your life because of generations of it. I can look at my family and I see at least 5 generations, 6 generations that I'm aware of that have gone through all types of sexual and physical abuse. And it gets carried on. And I remember at a young age, I was like, it stops with me. It fucking stops with me. Yeah. And I really feel like spirit came in, and I want to make this about me, but I do feel like spirit came in and was like, yes, it's going to stop with you and for a lot of other people. Yeah.
Where it becomes problematic is when somebody comes into a space and says, I'm suffering from this. And somebody else tells them, well, you create your own reality. Because what you're saying is, I don't want to walk with you. I don't want to feel uncomfortable here. So I'm expecting you to take the blame for this.
Yeah, I'm going to put the blame on you.
Yeah, and tell you to shut up. You're making me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to do the work with you to assist you in working through this. It's a deflection, and it's really nasty because it's done to people who are in very sensitive spaces.
And we can even, I remember, Michael, you wanted to touch on this with Black Lives Matter. And I feel like this is a great space to interject this, where we all have an understanding of how this nation was founded on the backs of Black people who were taken advantage of, who were abused. And that violence that was done to them, that infringement upon their personal rights that was done to them systemically, generationally, generation after generation, that shit doesn't just go away because a new generation was born. It's being carried on. And so part of what we as a collective do when we see this self-abuse showing up is, first of all, ask why. Why is it there? And what can we practically do to address the why instead of the behavior?
Yeah, and what we'll find is, again, like we were talking about before with the whole shame, blame thing, is when you attempt to point out, see, this is like a situation with an abuser and a victim. You don't tell a victim who is actively being abused, it's happening to them right now in the moment. You don't tell them, well, you need to let go of that other stuff. Or you create your own reality.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. When you're being shot, when somebody's just leaning on your neck and strangling you, you don't say things like that. That's an abusive thing. But also, again, we're dealing with when somebody tries to point out what's going on, and there's this knee-jerk reaction of, no, it's not, or deflecting, or denying, or, well, what about black on black crime? You know, like, that has anything to do with it. There's all this stuff that comes up in an attempt to avoid the blame, but nobody is trying to assign blame, right? They're saying, this is a system that exists. It's time to change it. It isn't important that white people accept some sort of overweening guilt for what their parents did, or not their parents, but even farther back, what their ancestors did, and it's all their fault, and now they need to feel guilty. What's important is that we stop it. We stop it right now. We stop what is happening right now, and we don't excuse it. We don't ignore it. We don't deny it. We just stop it. These are our brothers and sisters that are suffering.
And blaming them for showing up a certain way, when blaming anyone for showing up how they are right now when they haven't had the tools to heal, is a crying. I don't even want to use the word shame. It's fucked up.
It's fucked up.
Let's be real. It's fucked up.
Yeah, blaming the victim. I mean, again, you're looking at the whole victim abuser mentality of blaming the victim. Even when I hear this argument of the black on black crime, I think, what are you expecting? They have been recipients of violence for hundreds of years. Yeah.
Of course, they're going to reflect violence into this world. And
it's a deflection. It doesn't have anything to do with the topic. When police are abusing their position to harm others, that's the problem. It doesn't matter what something's, look at over here, something's happening. That's a deflection. Oh, look at here. No, that's a deflection. This is not okay. What's happening is not okay, no matter what's going on over here and what's going on over there.
Right.
You know, you see people sometimes that want to, well, we can't really talk about this until we've dealt with child abuse. What? We have to deal with every problem simultaneously. You know, this is relevant. This is
how are you
current.
prioritizing child abuse versus abuse against Black people? It's like,
they want.
How do you quantify that?
Yeah, it's just deflection. It's like, look at over here, look at over there. Don't look at this. Look over there. It's infuriating, because it isn't just with Blacks that you see this. You see this with women. You know, the Me Too movement, there was a lot of deflection going there. Not all men is a deflection. Nobody said all men. Why do you keep saying not all men?
Yeah.
Why do you keep saying
Exactly.
that? What is your purpose? You're trying to deflect. You're trying to distract from the discussion at hand. Or we can't address this issue until this issue is addressed. Another deflection. Nothing will ever happen if that's accepted as a reasonable argument.
Right.
You know, you can never create change if you think you have to do it all at once.
Right.
And so, yeah, we've kind of gone on a soapbox there, but but it is.
Beautiful.
It's very much like an abuser victim mentality. You see it in society too. It is not. This isn't just something that happens inside a home.
Mm-hmm.
It happens anywhere there's abuse going on. The same dynamics pop up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Michael. We also want to talk about how one of the other roots of shame is trying to be the good little boy and girl. And this goes into probably, I would say, tend and befriend.
Yeah.
Trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
What's your experience with that, Michael?
Well, absolutely. And it gets distorted in a lot of different ways. I mean, tend and befriend, of course, is problematic all by itself. But when we're raised that way, we tend to almost get an entire, sometimes we run into the nice guy syndrome, where we feel like, okay, I was the nice guy. I did everything right, so now you owe me. You know, and it becomes a transactional thing in relationships. And it's self-destructive because relationships don't respond to to transactional situations.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're like, well, you're only nice to me because you were trying to get something out of it. And that's where I see a lot of things happen with the relationships between men and women is the nice guy. We can talk about the bad boy, that's a different thing, but the nice guy thing where a man believes that because he behaves in a certain way, he's entitled to something, rather than just stepping up and saying, we're two adults and we have a give and take, and these are my needs, and I want to meet your needs in any way possible. And then you're seeking to meet each other's needs from a place of abundance, rather than, okay, well, he checked off these boxes, I guess I better meet his needs.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that behavior pattern of wanting to meet the needs and wanting to be the good little boy or girl, it comes from trying to survive, right?
Yeah, totally. And then you can build resentment too if you are meeting a lot of. This is another way it gets distorted. If you're all spending all your time meeting other people's needs and not even asking for your own, not expecting, but at some level you do expect, and it doesn't happen. You get in a one-way relationship with somebody who just takes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you build resentment, and that's an unhealthy place to be as well.
I even remember part of my wanting to be the good little boy, or excuse me, not a boy, good little girl. How that showed up for me was just going the extreme opposite. Like I was 19 years old, partying my ass off still. I moved out at a very young age, and I realized that wasn't working for me anymore. And I still hadn't realized that I was doing it because of trauma. And so in an effort to cover up all of that, maybe even out what I would call at that time good and bad, I went over the top in my good deeds. I mean, and this kind of went into trying to control everything else around me instead of trying to figure out what was going on inside. And so I became the good little girl. I went to church every Sunday. I went to church on Wednesdays. I did outreach. I did this ministry. I worked with these kids, and gave my money here. All these things to be the good girl, to cover up the shame of my past instead of healing the past.
Mm-hmm. It's like you're trying to buy your way into heaven. Where heaven
Exactly.
is really heaven is really connecting with your own true nature and being
Oh,
free.
oh, yes, that is heaven. That is
That is
heaven.
heaven. And you don't buy your way there. You,
Mm-mm.
you just
Nope.
remove everything that shouldn't be there. So anyway, yeah, and what touching back on the kind of going over the top in opposition to what you believe. We've seen this a lot in our religious communities, and it's kind of interesting because you see somebody rebelling against the way they were raised, and they decide they're going to do everything they were told not to do because they're rejecting that organization, rejecting that community, whatever. But really, if you are using their standards, even if you're reversing their standards, you're still using their standards as your baseline, right? You're still accepting what their belief system, even if you're rebelling against it, right? And so
Right.
it's
Just
like,
saying I'm going to do something different just to be rebellious instead of tuning into your nature. What do you want to do?
you haven't really rejected them. You're just angry at them. And you're rebelling, but you're rebelling
Nail on the head.
in a very destructive way. Instead of going into yourself and finding out what you want to do, right? What your values are, who you are, and what your purpose is, which is true, authentic connection to yourself. That is rejecting. That is truly rejecting those standards because they're no longer your own.
Yes.
You're away from it completely, and then what you choose to do is based on who you are. I don't know.
I remember, actually, you are quite aware, Michael. Don't shrug that off. You're quite aware. I remember when I was shifting my life and refiguring out what it is I really do believe. Like I'd come to this realization that I experienced a lot of abuse, that my belief system was changing. And I remember just shifting how I did it. And I want to invite people to consider doing the same shift for themselves. So because I had gone through so many years of abuse and so many years of dissociating from what it is I'm actually feeling and what my desires are and how I want to show up in this world, I really felt kind of lost. And so I committed a year to my pleasure and exploring that without shame and just saying, okay, I have this desire. I'm going to explore it and see what's there and see if I like it and take the right and wrong out of it. And I found that very beneficial. And so as people are shifting their own patterns, like things that they are finding discomfort with, things that are bringing issues in their life, explore a different pattern and do it with some curiosity. If you come up against something like, for example, I was trying to make more conscious choices about the men that I shared my body with, and it wasn't perfect every time. And when it wasn't perfect, I would just say, well, okay, I heard my intuition here and I ignored it. I saw this sign here and I ignored it. Okay, these are the pieces I can own. And next time I'm going to choose differently. So it takes away the right and wrong. And it's just like, okay, what can we learn from it? Just like a baby sticks their finger in the light sock and is like, fuck, that hurt. Hopefully they don't do it again.
Yeah. And you really know there's a problem when you keep sticking your finger in.
Yeah. And what we really want to invite people to is this a relationship of seeking to understand and love what's there.
Yeah.
I have a lot to share about that. Do you want to share anything, Michael?
Just that I really feel like you're on the right track. And it isn't that your path is everybody else's path, right? You chose this way and it was beautiful. It's absolutely a beautiful way because you're connecting with a part of your humanity that is so commonly rejected in our society. And so that's going to get you in touch more with your body, more with yourself, your own desires, your own values. And so whatever path that you choose to get in touch with that's essential because we're taught from our earliest days to disconnect from our bodies, to reject what our heart tells us.
Yeah.
Be obedient.
Be rational.
Yeah. Go into the head all the time. And yeah, so there's so much effort that's put into disconnecting us from our bodies and our hearts and our intuition. And so going back to that is not an easy process. And there's so many different paths to do that, but it's the only way we're going to connect to our humanity again. And I honor your path. It was beautiful.
Yeah. And then the next year I did a year of courage, which was interesting because that was the year that I started actually doing all the healing practices. Do you want to share? Do you want to give any tips about things people can do at home to move some of this energy and maybe find some internal peace and release?
Yeah, well, there's always meditation, and I highly recommend meditation because it gives you some, again, it's self-care time. You care about enough about yourself to take an hour or so. We're sitting down and just being with yourself, feeling the emotions that come up, feeling the thoughts that come up, and without judgment, without shame, and honoring them. It's a start. You're not going to get everywhere you want to go with meditation, but it's a start. And being more conscious of what's going on around you and why, instead of just reacting. If people are being abusive towards you, or I mean like abusive, but people aren't honoring your boundaries. Your friends are disrespectful to you, but you keep going back for more. You know, what is the space that you have created in your life? What friends do you have? What are your associates? Are they a positive influence in your life? And if not, why are they there? This is your space. This is your life. You don't get, this is the life you have right now. And so you're the driver, and you don't have to have someone in your life just because they always have been or because of an accident of birth. If they're self-destructive, if they're destructive towards you and you allow it, that's being self-destructive. And so you clear your space. Like keeping your house clean, you keep your relationships clear as well.
Yeah, so keep up on the maintenance. Clean the cobwebs, the dust. Yeah.
Yes.
I'd also like to invite people to try something different. This is something I learned in one of my trainings. We call it the dog shit and diamond list. So what this is writing down all the shit, okay? All the stuff that stinks, it's disgusting, painful, unsightly, whatever. Write it all down. And then on another list, you're going to label that diamonds. And you're going to go through each situation and write what it is you were able to take away from that. And why am I offering this right now? This is a chance to rewrite your story. This is a chance to form new synapses in your brain. So remember, we talked earlier about these Grand Canyons. So when we think about a painful or traumatic situation over and over and over and over again, it affects us internally. And how we're formed, sicknesses we can be susceptible to. So when we shift the view of the story like a diamond, the diamond has many assets, facets. You can look at it. Yeah, you can look at it from many angles. And I'm inviting you to look at it from an angle of what did I get out of this that I couldn't have gotten out of it had I not gone through it. And it's gonna dig up some shit, literally. And when I did this exercise, I was like, just on edge and ugh. And I remember messaging my teacher. I'm like, why are we doing this? And I realized the important step of rewriting my history, because one of the things I like to say now is I can't show up in this much power with this much understanding had I not gone through all of that shit. this is my diamond right now. This is one of my
Yeah.
diamonds right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I said something a while back, something along the lines of, there's nothing more precious than the lessons we have learned from the struggles that we have endured. We paid for that with blood and tears, blood, sweat, and tears. They are
Yes,
precious.
blood, sweat, and tears.
Mm-hmm.
I would even invite people to record it, record the diamonds and hear yourself speaking it, because feeling that vibration of a voice hits the body on an energetic vibrational level. So more than just reciting it in your head, speak it out loud, have it spoken to you. It's one of the things that I do to reverse all this negative programming in my head. Is I found this amazing rapper, artist, poet, man, and I'll share him in the links, but he has a lot of meditations. His name is Lundrell. And I really especially love his meditation on love and relationships. So repeating to yourself over and over the good things about you, the good things that you are.
Could I say one thing?
Yes, absolutely. Please.
I wanted to clarify something because it's important. When I say getting people out of your lives, I do acknowledge times we're in an extremely abusive situation. It's a dangerous step. It may be something that you get to enroll others in assisting you, and there's programs, there's people out there that can help, and so you get to use judgment and take care of yourself in this. If you're in a relationship with a violent abuser, definitely you want that out of your life, but you're going to have to take care to do it in a way that's safe. So it's just an aside. And also I want to say, in the way of making change in your life, is get yourself out of the fucking comfort zone.
Yes.
That is, nothing's going to change, nothing important's going to happen if you think you're going to do everything from a comfort zone.
Right.
Judge what you're doing by how uncomfortable you are doing it. That's a pretty good guide, actually.
And what a great segue, Mika, because I was about to bring that up next, of this ruthlessness that we need to have when it comes to finding our wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
If it took a lifetime to create you in this version, it's going to take a lot of effort to shift that. Imagine, I like to picture people who have gone through a lot of trauma and abuse as people walking around with like limbs hanging off and gaping wounds and an open head, and maybe, they got their artery leaking out or something. And if we don't do anything, or if we just try to stick a Band-Aid on it, that doesn't do shit. I understand it's scary to do this work. And you know what's even scarier? To stay like this and get worse and worse and worse and feel the pain over and over and over again. It doesn't have to be like this. There is hope. Please reach out and be committed to do the work, really do the work. We get lots of people reaching out to us who say they're ready and then don't want to put forth the energy to do it. And the energy is going to be, it's going to show up in a lot of ways. It's going to be emotional energy, mental energy, rearranging what you have as a priority now to make healing a priority. So that can mean getting rid of toxic people, changing your job, redirecting your finances towards healing. It's amazing to me that many people are not wanting to invest in themselves. And this right here is a clear telltale sign of self-abuse, not seeing the worth in yourself to actually invest in your wholeness. And you and Freya have so much to say about that. Y'all talked me into I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't need much talking into.
Yeah.
And you just share your expertise. You two are experts at this.
Well, it's all about your commitment level. You know, how committed are you to change? Because it's going to take commitment. Your results equal your commitment to change.
Yes.
And if you want massive results, it's going to take massive commitment. And some people equate that with, well, that means I'm going to have to re-experience or relive my abuse or trauma or something like that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, and I like your word, ruthlessness. We're talking about no matter what, I'm taking my life back. No matter what.
No matter
Nothing going to keep me away from having my life that's always been denied to me. Nothing. And that's a type of ruthlessness. And that's where the best results happen.
And even as practitioners, like our patterns still show up. My patterns still show up. I've been sharing a little bit on my page and in my group about my breathing patterns and how I've experienced like shortness of breath and holding my breath or forgetting to breathe. And I used a lot of tools and my body was like, it's not enough. We need more. It's not going away. You've been aware of this problem for a while. You're losing weight. And so there was this ruthlessness of how am I going to address this? And I had a breathwork session. This might shock a few people, this breathwork session. And I want to share a little bit of the methodology behind it. So part of what we do in our healing modality is tricking the brain into resolving a trauma. So when the trauma gets triggered, we coach clients through a powerful resolution. And so understanding that I have a lot of grief here, sorrow, loss, like I'm storing stuff here and I haven't quite released it. I called on a couple of people to help me with this. And I feel like I've been suffocated. I can't necessarily have a memory of being suffocated. And this is also important to remember. You don't have to remember all of your abuse to understand the traumas there.
Absolutely.
So I had these vague images of being suffocated, of having my head forced down, choked out. And so as a way to just go right into it, I did a shamanic breathwork session where I said, okay, if breathing in life is my challenge, then I'm going where the challenge is and I'm going to do a shamanic breathwork and I'm going to just get in there. And so all these things start coming up and intuitively, I'm just hearing, okay, have the practitioner restrain me. So I'm coaching the practitioner on various things just to see, is this it? Is this what I'm holding on to? Can I reenact this and come up with a favorable ending and get my breath back, get my life back? So it's ruthless, y'all. It's ruthless. If you see a problem, if you see your leg is broken, you're not going to go to the doctor for some pain pills and have them check out your arm and your pulse. You know what I mean? You're going to go get your leg fixed. So when you feel the dis-ease in your body, lean into it and ask for some guidance, ask for some empowerment.
Don't be afraid to involve others who have gone before, who are familiar with the path and who can guide you. That's what healers are. You're always doing your own healing. Always.
Exactly. Always. We're simply guiding you to it.
All the healer is a guide. They've walked the path before and they know how to do it.
Yeah.
So, and it saves you from trying to reinvent the wheel. And I know from firsthand experience, you can spend decades trying to figure it out, trying to reinvent the wheel and getting nowhere. And then when you bring in a mentor who's been there, who can guide you right through all of the distractions and side trips and everything take you where you want to go, the time you save is incredible.
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 Yeah, I even think about our history together. I met you maybe a year into my journey, and after I met you and Freya and we did our sessions together, it was like,
It was.
I just, I launched, I freaking flew. And that's how fast it is possible to be. It doesn't have to be 37 years to heal because you went through 37 years of pain. It really can be fast.
Exactly.
And it's how ruthless are you going to be?
And when you release that potential within you, when you release that energy, like you say, you just flew, you exploded. That's been pent up. That's been spent holding everything at bay instead of just going forward into your life. When you can use that energy to create instead of resist, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It is just like that.
It's beautiful. I think I want to, do you have anything else that's like screaming at you that you want to share?
No.
Beautiful. I think I would love to end on a note of love and the importance of love and healing. This is something that Michael, Freya, and I are very passionate about. We believe that fear and shame and things like comparison keep us in our pain and suffering. And the greatest way to counteract that is to begin this relationship of trying to understand yourself, where these behavior patterns are coming from. And from there, develop some self-love and compassion, because love is the most powerful binding force that is out there. I think everyone can agree that shame and fear and comparison only take us so far. And when our hearts are won over by love, there is nothing that will stop us, right? Like,
absolutely.
And when the heart is won over, the changes are lasting. There isn't this tired running on the hamster wheel of trying the next thing to cover up whatever. It's the full integration and self-love. And then when the self-love comes, that's when the healing can be engaged on a much more powerful level, because you're no longer shaming yourself for being there. You're saying, I get it. I understand. I love you too. Let's do this.
Yeah. And the healing never does end. That's true. But the healing that you get immediate results from it, changes your life right away.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you're bringing up healing doesn't end, because right now Freya's in self-care mode. Mm-hmm. And I've also taken a step back from putting myself out there as much as well, because I've realized my body is taking a lot as well. And if I don't care for myself, I can't give anything in this world. I can't show up in full power that I like the way that I want to. So really, people, love yourself.
Yeah. It's the differences between being in a place where the healing's continuum, but you're in control of it. You're creating it. You're on a path of healing, rather than stuck on a hamster wheel of never getting anywhere and no change happening. And that's the difference. That's the quality of life. Anyway.
Yeah, this was lovely. So next week, I think we are going to be talking on, we've added one more topic, and we're not sure where we're going to put this in yet, because it's going to be dependent on when Freya feels ready to participate again. But we want to talk about suicide. And it's especially alive for Freya and Mika today, because they lost their son not too long ago to suicide. And it was rooted in a form of abuse. And so this is why it's such a sensitive topic and relevant for today. And with a lot of people struggling with depression right now, with isolation and riots and lives falling apart, this is a very real reality. So we want to bring light to that. So we're either going to be discussing that next week, or we're going to be sharing about when the victim becomes the abuser.
Excellent.
Yeah. So stay with us. We got lots of good stuff, and we really hope that you're feeling shame lift off you as you begin to understand how trauma gets stored in the body and its effects and all that good jazz.
Beautiful.
Anything else you want to share, Mika?
Nope. And we will have contact information in the comments for Kelly and us, Ray and I.
And I'll put Lindrell in the comments too, the conscious rapper, lyricist, poet I was telling you all about.
Beautiful. Thank you for listening to us. We enjoyed this topic immensely.
Yes, thank you for joining. All right, y'all, take care. Have a beautiful day. We love you.